How about Whitney? That's the only person so far, so.
I just am admitting somebody, so maybe that's who it is. Okay, so for those of you who don't remember, I'm Julie Rounds. I spoke last week. Jim Walton is also here. And you guys all have the great pleasure tonight to listen to Patty Ragsdale. She is a 2017 Extension Master Naturalist. She sat in the row right in front of me during class. And she's the owner and grower at Happy Apples Farm, native plant nursery in Tonganoxie, where she and her husband do all sorts of wonderful things. She's been working with native plants in her garden since she was in college and studying wildlife management. In 2015, she began growing and selling native plants in order to share the fascinating plants with all others. And she volunteers a lot of time. You see Patty's name on a lot of things. She really encourages native plant growers. Some of the organizations that she does a lot of work with is the KC Farm School, the Kaw Valley Native Plant Coalition, and the Kansas Native Plant Society. And so I love this. Her goal is to help our community access information about all plants that are native to our area. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Patty, and she will give you all sorts of great information on our native plant botany.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, Jim, you guys, for being here and listening to me. I'm going to try to share my screen. So give me a second to get set up as I try to figure out how to do this. We're going to try the keynote. I'm going to play. I better get on my first slide. Otherwise, you'll see the end first. Okay. All right. So one thing I will say to you guys is while I've been doing Zoom a lot, what I know is I'm in the country and I have kind of a spotty internet connection sometimes. I have my screen set up so I can see some people. And the only way that I know that my internet goes out is when you guys stop moving. so I'm going to be relying on Julie to text me if something happens, because I have several different ways I can connect to the internet. So I'm just saying that so you guys know that I'm in the country and we have bad internet. I'm going to do the best I can, though, to keep everything going. I'm here to talk to you today about botany and from a master naturalist perspective. For me, botany means sharing the plants that you see in nature. So say you're walking with people, or people are out in their pasture or in a park or something, they might want to ask you as a master naturalist what that plant is. So a lot of it is plant identification. And plant identification is so darn complex. You know, and I think if I were to share my history with plants and the way that I came to love them so much, I'm still learning. It has been decades and I still learn about it, and I don't ever expect to stop, which for me is about the best thing about it. So as Julie said, I'm a 2017 K-State Master Naturalist graduate, and I came to this in a very circuitous route. I studied wildlife management, as Julie mentioned, in my youth, and was in love with it. And the best part of it was one class I took called plant taxonomy. But I wasn't there to study plants. I was there because I loved animals. I loved all kinds of wildlife and just being out there and watching animals. But what I came to realize the more that I studied is that they all depend on plants, and we depend on plants. And as a gardener myself, I found the plants to be absolutely gorgeous. So as life would have it, I didn't end up going into any kind of field related to wildlife or plants or anything. I ended up in graphic design. And that's why I've showed you this picture of a yearbook cover that I created, because the only connection with those two things is that as I was watching plants and animals and everything, I learned to draw them. So the study of them and in drawing them, you know, you get really close and pay lots of attention, which is a skill for botanists and for wildlife managers and nature lovers. That ability to really watch what happens around you and see what happens around you. So anyway, that translated into art. And that ended up being what my career was for over 20 years. I got to retire in 2015 and I immediately started growing plants for people because it was my chance finally to share with everybody what I loved. So you can see the third picture on this slide is a picture I took in my garden. And so my garden is teaching me a lot about how interconnected everything is, especially with insects. The insect pictured here is a monarch butterfly and a monarch caterpillar. These two have been so helpful, this species, in sharing with the rest of the world why native plants are important to us. So you can see the picture of me over there with my phone, that is constant. So when I'm getting these presentations together, it takes me hours to find the right pictures because I've been taking pictures for decades. I have of all of these plants. So that's just my history and kind of what I think most of the botanists that I know have a very similar history. It isn't really related to studying plants in college or anything like that. It's more related to really being in love with the environment and what's out there. So here's a few pictures of where you'll find people like me. Basically, we're walking in a field and we're looking at the ground. And in this picture on the top right, yeah, that's top right, that is the Kansas Native Plant Society out there in a field looking at plants in a hay field that was mowed just 3 weeks before. And you can see in the bottom, the picture right below here, that is Liatris punctata, or dotted blazing star, growing in that field. So it's kind of incredible to me how beautiful some of these plants are out there. And this one over here is a little annual that grows in my pasture in about the nastiest area possible. It's a bluet. So anyway, you'll find these plants everywhere, and you don't have to be trained in botany to really learn how to identify them. It's really just about looking. Botany is, in your binder that you got, you'll see that there's a section on botany, and it has a lot of information that includes a lot of the information that you're seeing here in this definition. What I'm going to concentrate on today is the classification part, because and that does kind of relate to physiology a little bit, but the discovery of plants and the classification of plants is probably what we'll focus most on. I'm going to start my timer. I forgot. We're going to try to stop at about 7:15. Just reminding myself that I have about an hour to talk now. And we can ask questions as we go. Plant taxonomy is what we call this activity of, or the science of classifying and finding plants and describing them. So the description of them is a very interesting process that involves a lot of Latin, or used to involve a lot of Latin. And nowadays we use more common names, but from a general perspective, I would say it still sounds like Latin because these are not normal things that we hear in our language, some of these terms. So a lot of what I'll talk about to you is terminology, plant terminology, and it's kind of boring. And so I apologize about that. I want to ask a quick question from you guys. And what I'd like to know is how many of you spend time with like an application on your phone or trying to find information about plants, like what a plant is called. Does anybody else get curious about that? Anne, do you? Or you can raise your hand, you can type it in the chat. Yeah, I see several people, but I don't have. Yeah.
I use iNaturalist. I'm kind of like you. I go around and take pictures, and then if I'm not sure what it is, I can send it to iNaturalist, and I learn a new plant.
Yeah.
So it's very helpful to me.
It is. And at the end of this presentation, I'll just say that I'm going to do a demonstration because as iNaturalist is used more and more, understanding how to incorporate some other tools that are available online with that is super helpful. So I'm going to try to end up the night a little bit early so we can do some demonstrations on my computer here, and I can show you how I use iNaturalist too, so that I can kind of avoid a lot of this terminology that I'm going to share. But I think it's kind of important to have access to it. So anyway, we'll get on with some of that terminology, and thank you for sharing that, Anne. Again, if anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat. I'm going to try to stop every so often.
Patty, are you watching the chat? Just to let you know, there was a couple people use picture this and plant ID in addition to iNaturalist on that question that you had.
I've never heard of picture this. Okay, so plant taxonomy. We're going to move on with plant taxonomy. Can cover a lot of different things. There are non-vascular plants. Those are the bryophytes. And I'm not going to say all of these words because honestly, I don't even know how to pronounce them. But that has the mosses, the liverworts, and the hornworts, and then the vascular plants, which is mostly what we're familiar with and we think of as plants. So those are the ones with conductive tissue, the xylem and phloem. If you ever took a basic botany class, you'll know that those are the two things that, you know, that how the plants get the food to the let's see, the leaves produce the sugar and that goes down and the water comes up from the roots. So xylem and phloem are really important. Those are kind of like the circulatory system of the plants. And so those are all vascular plants. And within that, there are two divisions. There are plants without seeds, if you can think about that. That would be the club mosses, the horsetails, and the ferns. So we know about spores, I think, most of us, when we think about ferns, those little dots on the underside. And I just learned about the life cycle of ferns because I decided I was going to try to grow some. That is really difficult because they actually have two different forms. But the form we're most used to as a fern has the spores on it. It's called a sporophyte. But those are plants without seeds. And then there's the plants with seeds, the spermatophyta or the angiosperms. That's what I call them. And that is what those are the ones that I really like, because when I think about the angiosperms, which is the ones that have flowers and seeds, the flowers is really what I'm in it for because they're beautiful, right? They're just crazy, crazy. I mean, they're so diverse. They're different colors, and you wait until you get to the grasses and the sedges. Oh my gosh, there's so many of them. But gymnosperms, those are the things like the pines, things with cones, things that don't really have showy flowers. They're more of a woody cone. So those are the two, that's the divisions of the plants with seeds. But we're mostly tonight going to, well, we're really just going to talk about angiosperms. My favorite thing. So a really important person in this whole science of plant taxonomy, which is part of botany, is this guy, Carl Linnaeus. He developed something called binomial nomenclature, which is just kind of fun to say. But basically it just means the naming system. Nomenclature is a naming system. Binomial means two names. And before Linnaeus came along, everything was, the only way you could describe a plant was by saying the whole description. So this big long thing right here was how you described a buttercup. And all of this Latin here, which I'm not going to say, except for ranunculus, which is, that's a buttercup, basically. All buttercups are ranunculus. And all of this is the description. So in English, this means the buttercup with bent back sepals, curved flower stalks, erect stems, and compound leaves. But what Linnaeus, I can't say it very well. What he did was made it into just two words. Ranunculus bulbosus describes this buttercup. And then the rest of it, so every ranunculus bulbosus would have the same description, but all you have to say to refer to it is this scientific name. And so this binomial nomenclature really simplified things. And the reason everything uses Latin is because that's kind of a common language, or at least it was in the 17th century when this was developed. So as before Linnaeus, all of this descriptive terminology that would describe a certain species was then how you named the plant. And after Linnaeus, there's just two words that name the plant. And in this case, it's ranunculus bulbosus. And then the rest of the description could be written in whatever language you want, but it might describe all of these parts. It would describe some parts of the plant, which would include lifespan, habit, root type, stem and leaf features, or the flower, or both. What none of the things that I found mentioned was this other division in these angiosperms and actually all plants, which is how many cotyledons how many cotyledons emerge from a seed. And so what a cotyledon is an embryonic leaf. It's not even a real leaf. It doesn't look anything usually like the leaf or the mature leaf will. And on the left here is what a dicot looks like. So this is what, in my opinion, what most people would think of as coming out of a seed. But over here is a grass called, what is this one? This is Elymus hystrix, or bottlebrush grass. It's a wild rye. And they always come out of their seeds with one single leaf that's very straight and pointy. And so those are monocots, one cotyledon. These are dicots over here, 2 cotyledons. So this one I think is, it's some kind of a Monarda. I think it's Monarda citriodora. So they're very, very different, and they stay really different. So we're gonna start our little journey with a common sunflower and seeing where it occurs in this whole taxonomy or classification. And you can see that it's, just to get down to our angiosperms, we're almost halfway down to getting to genus and species. And so Helianthus annuus is our common sunflower here. So this is what we just talked about, angiosperms. It's in this this class right here. So getting down to that level, if you're trying to recognize plants in the field, if we know that we're looking at a flowering plant, right, then we know that we're looking at an angiosperm. But just by saying that, just by getting this far, we could be looking at any of these plants. It could be this monarda, it could be this aster, it could be this milkweed. So we really haven't narrowed it down very much. What we really, really want to do is get down to at least the family. So the family that the sunflower is in is Asteraceae, which is like, it's really the sunflower family. It sounds like the aster family, but we call it the sunflower family. So they're composite flowers, which is the probably the most common. I think it is the most common kind of family of plants that we'll see besides maybe the grasses. So if we can ID things down to family when we're in the field, then we are getting much, much closer to being able to use something called a key. I think it's called a dichotomous key. So you get choices and you move down, and I never use one anymore. Had to use one in college. It was painfully slow, and you had to know all of that terminology that I just talked about, and I'm going to show you, and you're going to think, oh my gosh, how does anybody remember that? We don't. I have tricks to help you. But if we can get down to family when we're in the field, then we're getting really close. And actually, the more practice you get out there in the field looking at things, the quicker you get to this family level. So when you get to family, you're going to be looking at things like this, right? You might be looking at this sunflower, or you might be looking at an aster, but you'll quickly start to realize, even in a very large group of, or a very large family like Asteraceae, that there are significant differences in even just the flowers and the leaves of these two different species or different genuses. It's genera, not genuses, but I'm going to say genuses because most of us would. Genera is how you'd say multiple genuses, a plural genus. So the one on the left here is a sunflower. It doesn't happen to be a common sunflower, but it's pretty. So I put it in there. But this one on the right is, I think it's sky blue aster. So you can see that they have quite a few similarities, but if you look too, there's quite a few differences in the way these look, and it's not just color, it's in the form. So using these kinds of things, these are 3 field guides that I found very, very helpful, especially when I started. I still do the trees, shrubs, and woody vines one, because that one is quite good, and I'm kind of new to identifying woody plants. But the Wildflowers and Grasses of Kansas by Mike Haddock is just really a standard for most people. And then this one over here is by Ira Lee Barnard. Really helped me start to feel a little bit more confident with grasses. They're pretty hard. I will give you a list at the end, or this presentation, I'll put it into a PDF and we'll be able to share it with you guys later. And all of this will be in there, and there's a list at the end that includes these books. But so here's the trouble with those field guides. So that one right there, this big one over here, is an awesome book. It really is an awesome book. But this is the description in there for Asclepias viridis, or the spider milkweed. And if all these grayed out things are words that we don't see in the English language typically. So they're not familiar words. Like you might know, I didn't know or wouldn't know if I wasn't a botanist what exactly glabrous means. And I might not know what ovate lanceolate means. I might not know, what do they mean when they say simple and they're talking about a leaf? Or what do they mean when they say hoods? What is a hood in this? I don't know, right? So all of these terms that he's using kind of make these field guides difficult if you're not used to the terminology. And so in this presentation, I'm going to just show you a lot of these terms and what they refer to, and it's just kind of general knowledge. So when I read this stuff, I kind of have a general understanding of what these mean. And because of iNaturalist and because of these pictures that these wonderful gentlemen have put in this book, we don't actually have to know all of these terms, but they are helpful if you start to really want to make sure that you're identifying things correctly when you're using iNaturalist or something like that. Okay, so that being said, let's work into some plant taxonomy. So as we said, this descriptive terminology for the plant parts could include its lifespan and its habit and whether it's like woody or not. So roots, it might refer to any of these things about the root. So this is all root terminology. So fibrous roots would look like that. Tap roots would look like this. A corm, is that a bulb? Who knew that a bulb was really a modified group of leaves? I didn't know that, but it is. And then stolons, the difference between a stolon and a rhizome. Yeah, so there are differences, and knowing them kind of helps you in the field identify what you're looking at. There's different terminology for woody plants, twigs, and understanding how these little things, what they look like when a leaf falls off. But actually, once you get used to some of it, and you have a forester come and look at your plants, he'll have all kinds of tricks. Like told me about, I think it was a walnut. He thinks of it like a cat's butt. And those visualizations, when you're looking at this little leaf scar and the bud, help a lot. When you look at it and you see a little fuzzy bud there and then this thing under here, and he said it looked like a cat butt, and I was like, oh, I see that. Then it makes it helpful. So walking around with botanists really does increase your ability just so much. When I walk with somebody like Craig Freeman, who you might have noticed his name on some of those books, he will tell me things that will make me remember forever something about a plant and help me identify it. So when I talk about the Kansas Native Plant Society, I don't just talk about it because I really think it needs a lot of people there or anything to do anything. I just talk about it because it's people like Craig Freeman and Mike Haddock who lead the walks that we go on, and you will learn a ton. So if you're interested in learning, field ID, going on things like that, there's really no comparison between that and learning from a book. A really important part of plant identification is leaf terminology. There are so many different ways to describe leaves. I can't even begin to, I'm not going to talk about every single one because you would just die, you would fall asleep. But these things are super important terms to think about. Simple, when we talked about that with spider milkweed, it just means it's just a simple leaf the way you usually think about a leaf shape. Pinnately compound, that pinnate word you will see often, and it refers to actually a feather, I think, or a comb, this pinnate word. And this is an even pinnate, because if it was odd, it would have a little leaf at the top. And then there's double pinnate, like bipinnately compound, that one says. But there are leaves. I'm going to show you the next picture is going to be a tiny baby leaf that actually it starts out pinnate like this, but when it grows up, it looks like this one. And then this palmate arrangement is referred to in a lot of ways, not just in leaves, but that thinking of palmate. And I think of it like a hand. It comes out like fingers from a palm. So those terms are really important. And here's that little leaf. This is actually Illinois bundleflower as a baby. It's super cute. Just looks like it's waving at you. But you can see it's got just a regular pinnate structure to its leaf, where when it grows up, it's actually bipinnate. It actually has more leaflets on it, like another division. And then there's terminology for how the leaves connect to the stem. Crazy can be, and these are really important too to think about. This is the one that really drives me nuts, and you'll see I'm just about at my wit's end when I start to look at all the different ways people can talk about the shape of a leaf. Because, okay, this is one level of it, right? This is the shape of the whole leaf, and then they can talk about the apices, the tip of the leaf, or the base of the leaf. So there's all different, I mean, they can describe all kinds of details there. And they start to be important when you're trying to differentiate species within a genus, because like one species might have this kind of tip and one species might have this kind of tip. And that might be the only difference. Crazy. Remember when I said how that palmate and pinnate, those words were used often. I mean, they're important. So there's even venation. That palmate venation is kind of the same thing as a palmate leaf structure. And then netted venation, you can see this is a parallel veins. This is palmate veins. This is pinnate vein. So the pinnate veins come out from a central stem, kind of, or a central vein, and the palmate veins, they start in the center here and they all radiate from one little place. And then netted venation and then this is parallel venation. And you can see how important that can be in identifying species. These two leaves look very, very similar, but this one over here is our awful Sericea lespedeza. And this one is a native lespedeza that looks a whole lot like Sericea lespedeza. And the only way in a field you can really tell them apart is by holding them up and looking at the venation in these leaves. So these are important details when you're trying to identify things in the field. Okay, here's where we start to really get crazy. How many ways can something have a serrated edge? I mean, oh my goodness. So these are all different ways to describe the edge of a leaf. And here's a palmately lobed leaf and a pinnately lobed leaf. So again, pinnate and palmate become kind of important words to understand in plant terminology. This is about my favorite thing about leaves, I'll tell you, is how fuzzy they can be, and all the different words for a fuzzy leaf. And so I took this close-up picture of a really fuzzy little leaf in a tray in my greenhouse. So this is called silky aster, and I think that is about the fuzziest leaf I've ever seen. It's absolutely a beautiful, beautiful plant, but a silky aster even looks fuzzy when it's a tiny, tiny baby. I mean, these are just like one leaf past now I guess that's two leaves past a cotyledon, and they're already that fuzzy. And then this is a leaf, you know, on this previous slide, it talked about down here, sessile glandular. This is a glandular form in there, but the gland is sessile and clear, and it makes it look like these leaves have holes. And this is actually common St. John's wort, which is not a native species, but it's a real diagnostic. You know, when you're in the field, it's very descriptive of the plants. So there are a lot of St. John's worts, and many of them are non-native and some of them are native. But this happens to be the non-native, and that was how we could identify it, is just hold it up to the light and see if you can see pinholes through it. But it's not really holes, those are just glands. Okay, so back to our spider milkweed description. So we get a little bit more information once we know the terminology that's being used in some of these field guides. But this right here, when they start to put they put two of them together, then I just kind of lose my head and I'm like, forget it, never mind. You know, I kind of get the idea, and that's really all you need to do is kind of get the idea. But stuff like that starts to really, because they can do that, they can actually, you'll see them combine two words. It's kind of like, what do they call that? When we shorten a word, like can't, as opposed to can not, they'll do that with these words too. They'll put these two together and make a new word. But to solve all of that, what I do is I bought myself a book like this. And this is a super awesome way to, if you get stuck when you're looking at one and you just get super tired of trying to just guess what they're trying to say, look at it, get a book like this. So this book is an illustrated glossary. And even if you have, say, a plant part that you don't understand, this book will have a drawing of it and explain it for you. So when somebody told me about this book and I bought it and I started looking at it, I thought everybody that wants to learn about plants and wants to use a field guide should probably have one of these. So I put this at the, I think I did. Ooh, I might have to add this to my resource thing. I think I forgot, but it's a great one. Okay, so I don't know what time we are. I may be going a little faster than I anticipated. Does anybody have questions about anything that I've said so far? Anybody?
We don't have, there's no questions in the chat. The word you were looking for was compound for can and can't. And Whitney's doesn't have any questions, but she's enjoying the presentation.
Oh, well, thank you, Whitney. Appreciate that. Okay.
You know what I have found that that's just the easiest thing to identify plants is that you just take a picture and you ask Patty what it is.
I might be able to get close. I just happen to be a real, I just love to answer questions. I really do. So I'm very curious about plants, and I think that's a really helpful, I'm very curious about everything, honestly, especially everything that's outside. If it's inside, I really, who cares? But go outside, man, everything's fascinating. So like today, I didn't get to go out much. I was working on this presentation quite a bit, but every time I did go out, you know, there's just something new happening, whether it's raining or all of a sudden it looks foggy. And you're thinking, is it snowing? Is it raining? What is going on? So it's much more exciting out there to me. So if you ever have questions about plants, I can almost not help myself if trying to answer it. So we talked about all these different ways that we could describe plant parts or parts of, you know, things about plants. But we didn't talk at all about flowers. And that is really what most of us are going to notice when we go out looking for plants. And so there's a whole different kind of group of terms that describes flowers. And that's what we're going to talk about next, if you guys are good with keeping going. Okay. So we are going to start by looking at flower parts, because there's some very, it kind of gets, the fact that you can call these things so many different things, like sepals are the individual parts of the calyx, and petals are the individual parts of the corolla. And then the calyx and the corolla together are called the perianth. So they could be in any of the terminology that describes flowers. They could use any level of this division in describing these parts, which I don't know why they have to make it that complex, but they do. In general, I think the most important things to think about with describing flowers are that they're really sex organs. That's really exactly what they are. And it seems so weird because they're just so pretty, and you're not, but they have male parts and they have female parts. The male parts are the anthers, and what holds up this little anther is called a filament. And the anther is where you find pollen. And then the female part has this sticky part up here where the pollen attaches, and that's called a stigma. And the part that holds that up is called a style. And then this part, this fat part at the bottom, is the ovary, and that's where all the seeds will form. The rest of this stuff is really just meant to hold those two kind of general parts, the male and the female parts. So petals, that's what most of us think of as what makes something a flower, is the petal. And then beneath the petal are these sepals. And then something that holds that whole structure up is a receptacle. And then the stalk of a flower is called a pedicel. So those, oh, and I should mention down here this 5 meris thing. 5 meris, you're gonna, when I mentioned monocots and dicots, monocots have a different merisness, like a different number that's pretty typical than dicots. And dicots would be either 4 meris or 5 meris. I think I have a slide that says that later. But these are the principal parts, and these are how they are kind of collected into groups to describe them sometimes. And then when you go on to that, you can say that that's further divided and referred to. So when somebody says that a flower is complete, it means that all those 4 parts, these 4 parts, these whorls, all of these and all of these are present. If it's incomplete, it's missing something, whether it's the petals, maybe it's missing petals. And if it's perfect, it means it has both male and female. So it could be incomplete and still be perfect. It's kind of counterintuitive in my mind. I don't think you could be incomplete and be perfect, right? But maybe you can. If you're a flower, you can. So imperfect is either a male flower or a female flower. So they might have, you can't be imperfect and be complete. This is just fun logic for me. So somehow you can be incomplete and still be perfect, but you can't be imperfect and be complete. So an imperfect flower is generally, so there's 2 different ways down here. It talks about it. The dioecious is that you'd find the male plants, or the male flowers on one plant, and you'd find female flowers on a different plant. So like a spice bush is like that. Deciduous holly is like that. What else is like that? Oh, bittersweet is like that. So, you know, the beautiful bittersweet that has the orange and red dangly things in the winter, the flowers kind of dry and they are just beautiful with the red berries. That is a female plant. The male plant, it has a flower in the spring, same, and so does the female. But by winter and fall, it is bare, totally bare. There's nothing there. It's just the vines. So that is a dioecious plant. Spice bush is the same way. Spice bush will have the red berries in the winter or the fall, and the male plants will have nothing because their flowers have done their work and there's nothing else to do. Monoecious means that it has male and female flowers, separate flowers, but they both appear on the same plant. And that would be something like a hazelnut. So right now our hazelnuts are blooming, but the male flowers are in catkins and they've been hanging there since last fall. They open up at this time of the year, and then there's a bud close by that is actually the female flower, but it's not in the same place. So they don't occur in the same, they're relatively close, but not the same, right? And so that's what they mean when they say monoecious, and that's the imperfect flower and the two different ways it can appear. And here's another example of dioecious. This is pussy toes. Oh, my dog is barking at me. Pussy toes has male and female flowers on separate plants, but those plants grow all together, as you can see in this population. All the white flowers here are female, and all the pinkish looking ones, those are male. The pink is actually, or the red, it's actually red. And those are the anthers. And there's a little, if we could zoom in on it, you'd see there's little tips on it, and that's the pollen. So flower terminologies, number of petals, and we talked about this before. Meris is a suffix. Monocots are often 3 meris, or sometimes it's usually 6. I see 6 a lot, but like spiderwort is a monocot and it has 3 petals. So that's a kind of a way to see, like lilies, you know, lilies or monocots, a lot of things like that. You'll notice that they only have 3s or 6s, whereas dicots will be 4 or 5 petals. Sympedalous is a term that refers to fused petals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Symmetry is can be really very descriptive. Kind of, it doesn't make all that much difference to me. To me, it's more kind of about the arrangement, whether it's well, you'll see in the next slide how that works. But when they talk about bilateral and radial symmetry is probably more like if an elementary school student draws a flower, they're going to go around, 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 and it's going to be like a star shape all coming out. So kind of a palmate thing, right? Whereas bilateral symmetry is just kind of like a mirror image like this. So if you split it down the middle. And so here is some illustrations that help you understand what that all means. Over here is the radial symmetry we talked about. And so here's a 3 meris flower too, right here. That's probably like a Comoliniaceae, the spiderwort. And then this is a Fabaceae showing you the bilateral symmetry. And here is the sympedalous, or the like a cone shaped corolla. And here's another one, a bilabiate corolla, like the. So these are all terms that are just used to describe flowers and mostly the petals and how that's arranged. And here is a great example of that symmetry that we talked about over here, the bilateral symmetry, and this bilabiate corolla. The bilabiate has two lips, the upper lip, and you can see here it's looking really, before it opens up, that it's got one lip that curves over and the other one's underneath there. So the top one has 2 petals fused and the bottom one has 3 petals fused. But if you cut this down the center right there, it would be exactly, it'd fold out to be exactly the way that you see it here. And this happens to be a penstemon. This is purple beard tongue or penstemon cobea. Absolutely a beautiful flower, a great example of the bilateral symmetry that they were talking about on the previous drawing. Looks almost just like that, doesn't it? All right, and then, so all of that being said, there are 3 very, very common to us families of plants that have specialized flowers. And we spoke a little bit about Asteraceae, this one over here, earlier. It has composite flowers. So 2 different kinds of flowers in one, what we consider a flower. This is actually a whole bunch of flowers that make up this flower. And these out here, they just look like petals, but they're not petals. They are actually flowers, generally not flowers that are fertile. These flowers don't produce seeds. They're really there just to be attractive. Everything in the middle is what has all the good stuff that the pollinators might come for. And this is where all the seeds are produced in most of the Asteraceae. There's one exception that I know of, the silphiums, which they're just the opposite. They put all their fertile flowers out here and their infertile flowers in the middle. So that's Asteraceae. And then this one, oh my goodness, this is the milkweeds. This is just the weirdest, absolute weirdest flower I've ever seen in my life. And it's a death trap for some bees. Oh my goodness. They have to stick their foot inside here and pull out, hook with their foot, a little thing between 2 packets of pollen and pull it out a slit. And then to make matters worse, and I am just always surprised that a milkweed ever produces a seed, they have to go to another flower and get that back in there. It's amazing. I don't know how they know to do it, but apparently there's a whole bunch of nectar in there too. But this has just a totally different shape than any other flower I can think of. And so it has all these different terminologies that goes with it, like horn and hood. You won't see those in any other flower. And over here, this is Fabaceae, like the bean family, the legumes that fix nitrogen. They're all in this family called Fabaceae, and they have this really interesting flower arrangement that we typically think of as a pea, like a pea flower. But they have 2 other kinds, actually 1 other kind. There are 2 kind of variations on this particular flower shape. And then there's a 3rd one, and I'll show you a picture of that, that it belongs to this family that's a little bit different too. So anyway, these are specialized flowers, and they have special terminology that go with them. And here are the living examples of those things. This is in Asteraceae. This is a pale purple cone flower, absolutely beautiful, of course. All of these things are the disc flowers, and you can see the little ring of pollen every morning that appears there as these flowers open up around this edge. And that ring will move up. I think it moves up towards the center as every day, but bees will come around this day and get all that. And then the next day, it'll be the next ring in. that blooms like this has that out. So anyway, all the Asteraceae have something similar to this, these petals on the outside and a whole bunch of fertile flowers here on the inside. Asclepiadaceae is this milkweed family. Absolutely beautiful, or it's a class, I guess. And this is butterfly milkweed, and it's kind of hard to see here all of those flower parts, but this little sharp thing in there is the hood. I mean, I can't show you the slit. There's a slit in there somewhere where the bees actually have to stick their legs. It's right in here, but to pull it out. And here's Fabaceae, that big pea-shaped flower. This is on a Baptisia. This is white Baptisia, Baptisia alba. Other specialized flowers are grasses. Those are all special. And these little things right here, if you were in the field trying to identify grasses, and I wouldn't recommend it at all without a little tiny loop in your hand and some tweezers, and maybe, I don't know, you might need some way to, I don't know how people would do it. I've tried. My fingers are too big. I cannot pull these things apart to dissect them, but there are little tiny pieces here that have special names. So what I usually do when I need to identify a grass is I take it to the herbarium over at KU, and I give it to Craig Freeman, and I ask him to tell me what it is. And he's really good at actually being able to do that. Sometimes he can do it just from pictures. So grasses are super hard, but it's not just the flowers that we use to identify them, although when you're looking in grass books, you will see a lot of references to the gloom and the lemma, but I have never been able to identify them on the actual thing. Inflorescence, so arrangements of the flowers on the top of the plant. There's a whole lot of terminology related to that. Again, you know, we could talk about terminology forever and ever, but I'm just trying to give you kind of an overview for how the taxonomists are using these terms to describe different species. So they get really specific. And when you look at this, these are diagrams. These, you know, are diagrams that kind of help you understand what an umbel is as opposed to a corymb. And then a panicle, I call things panicles all the time, just because I think of a panicle, even, you know, when I think of like sand lovegrass and the way that it just kind of flows out and just looks like this big fluff, I call that a panicle. Whether it really is a panicle or not, I don't know. I'd have to really study that. And really see if that's what the botanists, the plant taxonomists describe it as. But that, as opposed to a chyme or a corymb, like all the Apiaceae, the carrot families will have tops like this, or these umbels. They'll look very similar. And so getting to know what these kinds of inflorescences represent in the plant families is kind of helpful. I'm going to show you one of my very favorites, and I had never heard this term, thyrse, but it is a term for a type of a panicle, or actually a chyme that is shaped like a panicle, a paniculiform chyme. And it's foxglove beard tongue. Actually, all the beard tongues have a thyrse for the inflorescence. I don't know, it looks like a panicle to me, but it's beautiful. So, you know, we saw the purple beard tongue earlier, the Penstemon cobea. This is a closely related plant that I also keep in my garden because it's really a great bee plant, called foxglove beard tongue. It's a great, great, great plant. Okay. So we are now to the plant families place, and I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I would love to take a break. what about you? Everybody?
I think that's a good idea. We did have one question. Can you just, and it was a statement from Anne, but it kind of, I think maybe more than one person might have had a question on it. She said, I think you just explained why my spice bush did not do well. I think it was a male plant because it never flowered or budded. It eventually died.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
I don't know what happened, Patty, but I bought it at the Arboretum plant sale one year, and I was so excited because I was hoping I would have spice bush butterflies. But I didn't get even spice bush blooms. So
yeah.
I never knew why, but I think you told me.
Well, it could be. Yeah, I don't know. I grew spice bush. Actually, another master naturalist gave me some berries from her, and this was Jan Curry, if she happens to be out
Mhm.
there. Thank you very much, Jan Curry, for those seeds. And so I grew a whole bunch of them from those seeds, and kept 3 for myself, and sold the rest of them to people, gave them to people. And so knowing that they're dioecious, that some of them are male and some of them are female, I'm crossing my fingers that with 3, odds are I got a male and a female. Anyway, either one should attract the butterfly caterpillar. It should provide, what they need, because they're going to eat the leaves anyway. They don't care. But to get the red berries, I'd have to have the female, and the female needs a male to actually produce berries. So I hear that the males have prettier flowers and the females just have the nice berries. So anyway, I don't know if only having a male or a female would, I have chickens and the hens like it better when they have a guy around. So yeah, I don't know if that's the way the plants work or not.
I have a question about a spice bush.
Okay.
I got like 3 or 4 of them from Soil Service, and they're doing really well in my yard. And last year I did get spice bush caterpillars, but I've never seen any of them bloom at all, ever. What's that about?
Well, it might just take a few years. I don't know.
Okay.
Like some things, like deciduous holly, I've got that. I don't anticipate seeing that bloom for a long time.
Okay.
They're just really, and my spice bush are 3, I don't know if last year was its 2nd year or 3rd year, but they didn't bloom, but they're growing and they're doing fine. So I don't know how long it takes. I'd have to do some research, or we can just Google it and find out if there's a time limit. But just like anything else, I think that maturity, especially with woody plants, takes a little time for them to start to flower. Like pawpaws, mine have been in since 2012, and they are just now putting on flower buds. They may have flowered last year and I just missed it, but that's a long time, 2012 to 2021.
Okay. I guess I just have to be more patient.
I know I'm not patient at all, but any other
Okay.
questions?
And it looks like there's a lot of interest in spice bush, so thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so anybody have any questions? Are we ready for a little bit of a break? Go recharge your glasses. So it's 7:07. Let's come back at,
You want to do 15 minutes? I know it's a
yeah, or
long,
well, let's come back at 7:20. How about that?
that sounds good.
Everybody here, come back and see you all at 7:20.
Julie, are you going to stop recording?
Excellent idea. Thank you, Jim. I'm pausing it.
Paul Showalter he's also a board member on the Kansas Native Plant Society board. He knows of that place, and Craig was going to take us on a walk, the master naturalist there, but we had to cancel it because of COVID. So anyway, hopefully that stuff will loosen up a little bit as people get their vaccinations and things move forward. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that we can do more of that stuff. But the Kansas Native Plant Society in general And I'm one of the people that would do it. I would give a walk, but I don't, as you can see, there's being an expert. Even Craig, he like if I ask him a question about sedges, he's going to send me to a sedge expert, and he's an expert. Craig's an expert. He writes the books, but his specialty is in penstemons, in those beard tongues. It's fascinatingly complex, the world of plants out there. And these are just the plants here in our own backyard. It is not something from Asia. It doesn't, and you would be so surprised just at how complex and beautiful all these plants are that we have here. It really is fascinating. So anyway, I think I've got this blog post up that I want you guys to see, but I'll go ahead and get my presentation back up, and we'll finish out the last of that, and then you can play around with me on all the stuff that I use, on the resources I use on the internet to help teach myself more about this fascinating subject. So I'm going to share my screen. Here it is. Oh, are you guys seeing my screen? No?
Yeah, we can, you don't have a full screen. You've got the sunflower family up,
Oh.
and
Great.
there you
didn't know
go.
you were watching me.
There you go.
Okay, so Asteraceae, we were talking about Asteraceae right after I showed you my favorite penstemon. Actually, it's my second favorite. I have to love the purple penstemon better. It's just prettier. But this one blooms a lot longer. And a thyrse. Who knew that there was an inflorescence called a thyrse? So Asteraceae is the most common of all these herbaceous species. Oh, I didn't tell you that term. I should tell you this term. Anything that's not a grass or a sedge or doesn't look like a grass, it is called a forb in general, or an herb, or a weed.
Excuse me, Patty.
Yes.
Debbie, Rosalie Ost has a full-size screen of Deborah Wald. Did you get your screen corrected, Rosalie?
No, I'm gonna leave and come back and maybe that'll fix it.
Okay,
I
Sorry.
recognize Rosalie.
sorry.
I talked to Rosalie the other day.
Yeah, I messed up. I don't know how.
Jenny says clicking speaker view can help in the top right. So
Okay, I'll try that.
sorry, Patty.
That's okay. I'm good on time. Oh yeah. Good to.
Okay, I have it now. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. All right. So we mentioned Asteraceae and their specialized flowers. It is the family, the sunflower family, the biggest group of species that I can really think of here, especially in the Great Plains. So down here on this page just talks about some of the specific characteristics of this family. And it's a good reference just for kind of understanding some of the ways that you can identify this species in general. But it is so diverse. You'd really be surprised. Some things that don't look at all like a sunflower are in this family. And one of them is ragweed. Who knew that a ragweed was in the sunflower family? So all of these down here are just some examples. The chicory, the false lettuce, like who would have thought that? I wouldn't. Thistles are in this family, and thistles are not bad. I'm just going to say, shout out to thistles. They're awesome bee plants. We just happen to have some non-native thistles that have given thistles a bad name. But they are, in general, the native thistles are not a bad thing to have around. So, okay, I'm going to move on to this next slide and show you some of the diversity in this Asteraceae family. Liatris here is interesting, right? Every single one of these bundles is actually a flower, a composite flower. So that means as a composite flower that every single one of these has a bunch of flowers in it. So this happens to be Pycnostachya, Liatris pycnostachya, and it doesn't have the biggest bundle of flowers, but it is obviously has a lot of bundles of flowers. So this inflorescence type is called spike. So even though the Asteraceae flower is composite, right? So each one of these little dots being an Asteraceae composite flower, which has all kinds of flowers in it, it can be in an inflorescence of almost any kind. So in this case, it's a spike, and it's a gorgeous one, right? Who wouldn't love that in their garden? So I love Liatris. They can be kind of floppy, but oh my gosh, nothing else looks like a Liatris. It's gorgeous. And over here, there's a picture of Rudbeckia, which is the black-eyed Susans. Sometimes they go by the name coneflower, like this one here, I think is Rudbeckia subtomentosa, or sweet coneflower or sweet black-eyed Susan. But it's not an echinacea, it's a Rudbeckia. It's in the black-eyed Susan family, and it has that typical look of a sunflower or those daisies kind of look. This one with it is ironweed, which it kind of has a flower to me that resembles this little bundle of a Liatris flower, but it's in a totally different inflorescence than the Liatris. Instead of a spike, it's more of that corim or umbel looking inflorescence. So anyway, they can be in all these different arrangements, but all of these things, and this is an aster down here. This is a really pretty kind of shorter aster, but it spreads like crazy, super pretty, called Symphotrichum ericoides, I think. So heath aster, it's kind of pretty. But it has just, the one thing about this family, like the asters and the Liatris and the Vernonia, there's all, so Eupatorium and Eutrochium, the Jopioides, they're all in the same family. They have abundant floral resources for pollinators. So this, and oh, I don't have one on here that's so important, that all of the goldenrods are in this family too. So, all of these are, and they bloom throughout the season. I mean, there's almost one for every season that I can think of. So if you're gardening for pollinators, or if you're talking about ecological services that these plants might serve for insects, I mean, they're just abundant floral resources for all pollinators. So all nectar gatherers, all pollen gatherers. These are great plants and very, very necessary plants. Really, really common, often tall, or they spread by rhizomes. Not in the case of all of these, but like all the asters do and all the sunflowers do. So anyway, this is the Asteraceae family, and really is a very, very common large family. And then we come to this milkweed family, which I don't even know how to describe how strange it is. And that's what I was looking for when we were speaking after the break, was this blog post that I saw from Chris Helzer. And if you guys don't follow him, he's called the Prairie Ecologist. He has a blog, he has an Instagram, things like that. He's I think he's like the biological director or something like that for the Nature Conservancy. Great photographer and really, really passionate about prairie. Well, he did a post and I wanted to share it with you because it describes all the things that have to happen for this Asclepias genus to achieve pollination or fertilization in this flower. Right down here is the pollen sacs, and these pollen sacs occur in this little slit in the side. So they're inside that, and it has to be taken out of that and put in a different one inside that slit to actually achieve pollination. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But you can kind of see in these drawings, I like this very much because it kind of shows you where these little things, this horn, this hood, where these things are in this flower, because they are very hard to describe and they're hard to see. I might try just really quick to show you his description since we're in this and we have time, where he describes this, if I can get to it. It's this blog post. And he's got a really good way of describing things. So just a very enjoyable read for everyone. But what I want to get down to, and here he's got a picture, there's that slit. And if you can imagine, I mean, that does not look very easy to hit to me.
We're not, Patty, we're not seeing your screen. We're still just seeing the, the PowerPoint.
I get what I did. Hold on. I get it. I'm going to go back and share again in a different way because now I know what I did. Now I can do it. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, see that slit? That's little. It's really small. So that is where that little pollen sac is. And here you can see it down in here in a showy milkweed. And these all have nectar in them. So there's nectar resources there too. And here's a picture of a wasp that has actually got those pollen sacs on his legs. Tiny little yellow things here. Those are pollen sacs. And a milkweed beetle who has the same thing. Here's one stuck on his leg. Amazing. Okay, so that's like half the process is getting it out. So he says, accidentally slide one of its legs into a slit on the side of the milkweed's flower, successfully extract the leg again, don't die and get, this is really happens at the pollinator prairie. You can go by and look at the milkweeds, middle of summer when things are going crazy, and you will see honeybees, it's almost always honeybees, dead on milkweed flowers. They get stuck. I don't know why it's the honeybees. I'm thinking they're just not meant for those flowers, but they get stuck. It's weird. So don't die and snag the pollinia on the way. Leave the pollinia on its legs. Insects often attempt to pull them off, but they seem to stick pretty well, he says. Visit a different flower, accidentally slide the same leg into the slit on that flower. That all has to happen for pollination to happen on a milkweed. And amazingly, milkweeds look like this at the end of the season, filled with seeds. I don't know how that happens, but that's the process. And that is how strange some of these flowers are. So I just wanted to show you that because it really stuck with me how really fascinating some of these systems are that have developed with the insects that are necessary for pollination with these flowers. Okay, so that was a little aside because we have time, so you can learn how I learn about the interesting things in these flowers. And here's a little picture, close up of your Pollinia that we saw hanging on those little bugs' legs. And here are some beautiful images of some of the milkweeds that are here. This one over here is a summer bloomer, usually sometime in August. This is swamp milkweed, blooms later than a lot of the others. This one down here, we're not sure, it's at the pollinator prairie. I'm not sure if it's the purple milkweed or the Sullivan's milkweed. When I took this picture, I didn't make a note. But Sullivan's milkweed can actually look as purple milkweed. But the only difference between those is how the, I would say that the leaf attaches to the stem differently. On Sullivan's milkweed, it's sessile. It's like almost wraps the stem. Whereas on purple milkweed, it looks more like the like common milkweed does, but the flower will be upright and purple. And the other difference would be in the seed pod. The seed pod on purple milkweed is spindle shaped and smooth. And same way, Sullivan's milkweed, it's smooth, whereas common milkweed is has those spiny things on it. This is
Patty,
a real,
what's the one on the left?
This one
that
right
one? Yeah.
This one is tall green milkweed, and this occurs in my pasture. It's called Asclepias hortella, and it is I had never seen it described anywhere, and I finally I found it shortly after I moved here, and it occurs everywhere in my pasture. It's really a really interesting one. Has a lot of flowers on it. It's just really different than anything else. So anyway, these are just 3 in the Asclepias genus, but you can see here that there is that vining milkweed. That's a different genus, but it's also in this family. I don't really know what the carrion flower looks like. Does anybody else have familiarity with that? I don't.
Mm-mm.
So really it's milkweeds. This is another large and very common family here in Kansas. This is Lamiaceae, the mint family. One really strong characteristic of this family is square stems. And another one is fragrance. So a lot of identification, or some identification, at least for me, when I see a plant that I'm not sure of, I will smell the leaves, crush them and smell them, because this particular family is, all of them have some kind of a fragrance attached to their leaf. Some of the others, like even in Asteraceae, some of those have some fragrance too, like the sweet milkweed and sweet coneflower, black-eyed Susan, and then the sweet Joe Pye weed. They both have a very kind of a baby powder scent to them. But these are typically used for teas and things like that, fragrance. So the mint is in this family, obviously mint family. Monardas, salvias, oregano, a lot of things that you would think of with flavorings and smells. Square stems is a very, very very dominant characteristic in this. And then you wouldn't think it looking at these flowers, but they actually are bilabiate. They've 2, they open up like that. And so here's a close up right here. And you can see it's 2 lipped, one big there and one here. This is the flower. And down in here is where the ovary is. And so the seeds, when all of this flower part falls off, you really just have a whole bundle of these flowers on top of a receptacle or wrapping around the stem. And then the seeds are at the bottom of every single one of these tubes. They're really fun to clean seeds wise because it's very fragrant that day. You're crushing all the plants. It smells really good. Okay, so here are some pictures, mostly from my garden, of 3 of the genera in this family. The salvia, and this is our native blue sage, which I think is gorgeous. Blooms late summer, and here's a pretty bumblebee enjoying it, but it's also enjoyed by hummingbirds. They like it too. Everybody knows Monarda. I could show you another picture. I had another picture in here of a very different Monarda, but everybody knows this one. This one's wild bergamot. This is the one we see in our prairies. If you drove out through the Flint Hills, 1st of July, you would see this growing all over the roadsides. Another one, and this is absolutely my favorite, most fragrant plant, is mountain mint, and the genus for that is Pycnanthemum. And I think this has a better fragrance than any other mint I've ever smelled. I really love it. Very nice. So these, like I said, common, very large family. You'll see them, and they're pretty distinctive too. I mean, to me, they're very distinctive. Kind of easy to find and recognize. Square stems, though. Always look for square stems. That's my first tip. Okay, Fabaceae. This is the pea family. These are the legumes. They actually have 3 different flower types, and they're kind of talked about over here. Here's some genera that are in there. Clover. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. This is the plant for St. Patrick's Day. I won't show you any clover today. Oh, actually I do. Purple prairie clover, so I guess I do. But red buds are in this family, and so are the locusts and the Kentucky coffee tree. So there are some woody plants in this genus. Also, let's see. What am I thinking? Lead plant, that one, the silvery one with the really, it's really beautiful. Amorpha canescens, beautiful plant. It's a little shrub, like subshrub, and it's in this not genus, but family. The mimosa tree, I have a mimosa genus on the next slide, but it does not refer to this tree. It just happens to have that genus. And then these here are, you'll see these too. I actually had a milk vetch, the astragalus genus, last year here, but I'm not having a good time keeping that alive in my garden. So I'm going to have to find out more about that one. So here are 3 of the genera in this family. One is the Baptisia, which I showed you a picture of earlier. I just happened to really fall in love with this white when they came up in my garden a few years ago. But they actually have these giant pea flowers, and it's usually a big bumblebee that will open this up because they are totally closed. They're very tightly closed. And it really, the bee, it takes the weight of that bee to actually get in there and open it up. This is the really odd flower type that you don't see often or wouldn't often think of as this family. This is that mimosa. This is Mimosa quadrivalvis, or cat claw sensitive briar. This is a beautiful plant, but it has stickers all over it. Boy, it would stick to you anywhere. I mean, stickers as in little claws all over it. So they called it devil's shoestring too, but it's so, so pretty. These flowers, I mean, they're like Dr. Seuss flowers, they're little floofs with little tiny balls of pollen on the tips. So, so pretty. But just like, they look a lot like mimosa, like the tree, right? But these are sensitive. So if you touch these leaves, they do close up. So this one is Dahlia purpurea, or purple prairie clover. So this is the only clover in my slide. But the clovers typically have 3 leaves right here. You can see tiny, tiny leaves on this one, but these are all little pea-shaped flowers that bloom in a ring up this cone. So every day some new bee will come along and harvest pollen from this, and they just run little circles around all of these wands with the flowers. So it's really a fun plant for kind of acclimating children and even grown-ups to bees, the native bees, and how they really are very harmless to all of us people. Okay, Poaceae is the grass family. We did talk a little bit about these specialized flowers, and so I won't talk any more about it, but it's a large family, obviously, in these grasslands. Includes a lot of very, very big plants that you wouldn't really think of as grass, like bamboo and corn, but mostly it's the grasses that we see, and they all are going to share these same characteristics of flowers. Something that's very closely related, and I'm sorry for some of these scans, they're from my very old textbooks from college, but some of them are. But information on these families sometimes is hard to find in one little spot. But the sedge family, Cyperaceae, includes a few genera, but the one that I always think of as sedge is Carex. This one, Scirpus is one that I have one called, a plant called woolgrass that I grow, and so it looks like this. It has a panicle like this at the top. But most people think sedges are Carex. That's the genus. So I'm going to show you, but it has a different kind of flower structure, a very different thing. And it's called a peringia, I think, or I never can say it right, but I think it's called peringia. It's an inflated little flower sac that has the seed inside, and it's very characteristic of this genus, although it can be arranged in lots of different ways. So over here is a grass. So this is Poaceae. This one is prairie June grass. It's a real small, cool season grass. Kind of looks like those big maidenhair grasses, right, that you see, only this one's in miniature. It's only about a foot tall. Super pretty in the spring. Over here are two sedges, and I chose these two pictures because of how different they are. So you can see these little balls on this one up here are the peringia that are specific to this genus of Carex. Both of these are Carex. And this one occurs out in my pasture. It's Davis's sedge, not one that you'd see very often, but I think it's really kind of cool. The way that these dangle off the sides, really, really pretty. And this one is called Gray's sedge or Carex grayi. And you can see every single spike here is one of the peringia. And off the tip of this, so these are all the female flowers. And off the tip of that, and I don't know if you can really see one, but this structure that you can barely see right there, it's a little brown thing. It comes out of the tip. Mm-hmm. That's the male flowers. So this goes away. The little brown thing where the male flowers are goes away later, but it leaves these spiky balls on there all season. So really an interesting genus I'm going to show you, that's part of my demonstration later. You would not believe how many sedges there are in North America. It is really incredible. So that is the Poaceae and Cyperaceae family. So hopefully you guys have gotten kind of an overview of the terminology that is used in some of these field guides. And this is a kind of a reference to some of the field guides I talked about. I do need to add that one book, which is the glossary, the illustrated glossary, and that's probably the most important one. just for understanding terminology. And that being said, I would be ready, if you guys are, to take some questions, and then I'm going to do a little demonstration on range maps and how to use iNaturalist, kind of effectively using those range maps, and also a little fun thing that I found was possible to help me with pronouncing some of these names, which, as you can imagine, is not, it's just not taught how to speak a Latin name. Okay, does anybody have any questions? No? Awesome. All right. All right, so first, the fun thing, I'm going to close this one. There's my Zoom meeting. I don't want to close that. Does anybody use this as a resource? The Missouri Botanical Garden website, MoBot. So the neat thing about this site, they have a plant finder, but honestly, I haven't figured out how to access it directly. So usually the way that I access this kind of a page is by doing a Google search for a genus or a species, if I have that name, and one of the results will be the Missouri Botanical Garden. But I'm going to try to go back, if it goes back, but it doesn't. Okay. So let me see. If I go to Missouri Botanical Garden, it's going to come up like this. And then say I know my genus and species that I want to look for. So that one was, I'm going to, up in the search bar, I'm going to put Geranium maculatum. I happen to know how to say it because I've already done this trick. But if I search, it's going to come up like that. I'm just going to click on this one. So when you get to this page, if you see this little speaker, I'm going to push it. It takes a second.
Geranium maculatum.
Somebody tells you how to say that name. I don't know who that is, but I love that guy because I can actually sound like I know how to speak Latin because of him. Like, let's see. I think it's Colaria maculata. I think. There it is. Wonder if they have it. Macrantha. It's not macrantha. It's not maculata. Colaria macrantha. He's going to tell me how to say this one too.
Colaria macrantha.
He says it different than I did. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that because it's super fun for learning how to say Latin names. This is the only place I've ever seen that available. But going to the Missouri Botanical Garden, and again, I just search Google, and usually the Missouri Botanical Garden will come up. And this is all in the midst of researching something. You know, people give me seeds all the time, and people ask me if I carry plants all the time. And so my first thing to do is to make sure I know enough about that plant to feel confident that it's a native plant here, and then I know how to say it and stuff like that. So anyway, that's one thing. Okay, so another thing, as I said, I do some research on species that I don't know, and iNaturalist can help me. If I run into things that I don't know in the field, I might take a look at iNaturalist and see what they think it is. I'm going to show you that next. I had to put that same picture of the sedge that I called Davis's sedge in here. And one thing that I've noticed about iNaturalist, and this is on my computer, it's way different on my iPhone. And I would highly recommend downloading it on your smartphone. If you're going to use it that way, because it's a much more immediate way. I found this to be really clumsy. This was the first day that I really got in here to try to use it this way. But I uploaded this picture and I set a point, which is my home, because this was taken in my pasture, to tell them what, where I took it. And they gave me, I don't know if I can pull this away. Anyway, to get this, their recommendations. See, I didn't know what it was. I had to click in this species name right here. And they gave me these suggestions about what this species is. They know it's a sedge. They know it's in the Carex genus, but they don't know for sure which of these it is. The first one they give me is longbeak sedge, which is Carex springelii, which I've heard a lot of people talk about, and it looks a lot like this. I know it's not that, and I can tell you why. 2 reasons why I had the herbarium confirm the ID for me. But this is how I know for sure. And this is what I want to show you about effectively using this tool. Even though they're giving me all of these possibilities that sedge could be, if I go to this place, which is, these are range maps. This is my absolute favorite range map website. It's called BONAP, and you just search bonap.org and you will come to this page, which has a lot of stuff on it. But what you really want is this list plants by genera, and it's under the US county level distributions, list plants by genera. And if you click on that, this is really awesome. It changed my whole world when I found it. It's going to give you this alphabetical thing. And under here, these are all the genera that start with A in the US that they know about on the biota of North America. We know that we're looking at a Carex. And so I'm going to look in these C's and find Carex. It's right here. It's only great. It's only purple because I've already clicked on it once. You're going to be amazed because this Carex thing, look at how many there are in the US. These are all different species of Carex. And you'll notice different colors on these maps. What I like about BONAP is that I can see all of these maps kind of at the same time. So I'm going to get down to Springelii, which is what iNaturalist suggested. It just goes on and on and on. Oh my gosh. So I'm almost there. No, did I pass it? Oh, there it is. This is the map for Springelii. And here is Kansas. It doesn't occur in Kansas. Not that plants know state borders, they don't. It could actually occur here. I mean, here is my little county, Leavenworth County. So it could be here, but it probably isn't. Davis, so you could look through here for sedges in Kansas. You could, I mean, this isn't probably a good one to do this with, but I've done this with orchids, like those little ladies' tresses orchids. There aren't so many, you know, maps here, but you could actually go through with, you know, a suggestion from iNaturalist, and you could check and see, does that suggestion actually occur in my area? Davis's sedge, which is what this is has a range. Good grief. This is the range map for Davis's sedge right here. And there we are. And it is known to occur here. I have some others that sedges that occur here that show up in yellow, which means they're rare. It's a rare occurrence. So you can use this map or this mapping system here to look up any species or do research on any genus that you might be interested in, or any, oh goodness, I'm having Microsoft updates, not good. But anyway, I found this to be super helpful when I was doing, anytime I want to do research about where a plant actually occurs. You know, it might be native, but maybe it's only native in Pennsylvania and it's not native here. So, you know, being able to describe a range for a plant that I sell and talk to people about it, because a lot of people are really interested in whether it's a Kansas native or whether it's a Great Plains native. And so I think that's an important thing to kind of keep in mind when you're talking about native plants, is that they actually do have a native range, and it might not include Kansas. Like there's a red monarda that everybody loves, doesn't occur in Kansas. It occurs farther east. And I think of a native shrub that's a gorgeous, you know, shrub for gardens. It's oak leaf hydrangea. It is native in the US in places like Mississippi. It will grow here just great, but it's not native in Kansas, doesn't occur here or really very close to here. It just will grow here just fine. So
Patty,
yes.
there's a question. Heather had a question. She really likes the map. Do you know, have you tried to narrow the area you're submitting so you're not looking at all of the United States?
I don't know. You know, we can look back there and see if that has, I haven't tried that.
Okay.
To see if they have state. Let's get back to, oh, I'll show you this just real quick. This is the color key. So you can kind of understand what some of those colors mean. So they do have noxious species like noxious weeds. Now this isn't necessarily always correct. I rely more on the US, that I'm going to show you another mapping system. But anyway, just showed you that real quick, just so you can see that. Oh my goodness. Oh, my timer went off. I think I'm done. Okay. Okay. We did I want to go back one more time. Let's see. State level distributions. Let's see. This is a good question. So I haven't explored all of these things. I like to go, state level. I think this just, like if we went to, let's look at.
I mean, it is titled North America on everything. So,
yeah.
And I said the United States, but I was wrong there. It's North America. So maybe
I think I think it's a good question, and I haven't explored it at all. But I think these are just a simplified map. Like it doesn't show the county level on that one. Let's see. Very good question. Traditional specialty maps. I don't think so. I mean, as far as I can tell, it's not doing that. But I'll tell you, don't be, I'll show you so it's not always like Carix was not a good example because there was a zillion maps, right? And a zillion species. But you could look at like Dracopus. Dracopus, poor thing, would not have, where's Dracopus? There it is. Okay. There's only one species in North America. So that's a pretty simple one, right? It's actually a really awesome plant. So, but depending on how many species occur, Carex is an incredibly large genus. I won't be surprised, would not be surprised if it doesn't get split up taxonomically later, just because it is so large, really, really large. I don't know if it's the largest or not. Now that's genus. So we've been talking families, and I said Asteraceae, which is a family that has a lot of different genera in it. So Asteraceae is big, but a genus in Asteraceae, which would include Dracopus, is really small. It only has one species. That just happened to be a really big genus that we were talking about there. So does that help? And anybody have any questions about this particular range map other than that? I know Rosalie has already seen this because I showed her this. I think, didn't I show you this?
No, I didn't see that.
I think it was, I was talking to somebody else that was a master gardener for Johnson County and showed them that before you and I talked. Okay, so that is BONAP, my absolute favorite mapping program. So in addition to BONAP, so we could look this species up on, I have a different Carex in here. This happens to be
Patty might be frozen. Hang on just a second here. Let me just text her real quick. Okay, she's sorry. I can only do, I'm not very good at multitasking, like talking and texting at the same time. So she dropped off, so she's probably going to come back in here in just a second. It's pretty interesting stuff. I did not know about that BONAP before. Like I can see a lot of people. Raise your hand if you've ever even heard of that before. Nancy has, and Roxy, and Allie. Couple people. All right, so she's getting back on. Hang on here. Oh, there she is.
I'm going to unmute.
There you go. You're back.
I knew it. Okay. Here we go.
I took a small poll while you were gone to see how many people knew about BONAP, and not very many people did. And we've had a couple people express their appreciation for sharing that.
It really did change a lot for me. Now, the way I got to it was through, if you're interested in growing plants, there is a nursery called Prairie Moon Nursery. they just have so many seeds for so many plants. I mean, really they do. And they have a tremendously good like learning center, or kind of a place where you can go to learn to. They have videos, they have how-to guides on how to grow from seed. And that place, they have range maps there. And I noticed bonap.org in the corner of one of those range maps, and that's how I found it. But it's open to anybody. You can do it. USDA plants, this is the one that the Kansas Native Plant Society would generally send people to. I don't find this one as easy to search, and I don't like it for doing research on a gene, because I can't see all the maps at once, or, I can't really get I have to go individual species by species to look at maps. So I have to know a lot more before I look. So anyway, if you type in your species and then you click go, it will take you to the page for that plant, and it'll show you the map. And so you can see this is kind of a state level map, but using this slider, you can zoom in. And once you zoom in far enough, you will actually see counties. And it looks a lot like the BONAP map. And then they have native status over here. I am not sure how USDA actually designates noxious weeds on here, or things like that, or invasives, things that they consider invasives. But anyway, this is another map program that I think it's a really great thing. And they have a lot of information. So they have fact sheets and plant guides. So you can download PDFs from here about these plants. So it's a good way to learn about specific species that you know about or want to learn more about.
Patty?
Yes.
Jen Dady may have answered a question. She found a filter by state on BONAP.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she posted it on in the chat box.
I want to go look because I've never used it.
I have it ready to text to you. So
really? Do you?
Yes, I seriously have the screen up. I'm going to text it to you in just a second here. There you go. bonap.net/field maps.
Yeah, we're just seeing the North American one. Or I am anyway.
From there on the right-hand side, you can pick state.
But it's not going anywhere. Or mine's not.
I think she's frozen again. She hasn't moved from my screen.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. I was looking at. Oh, let me text her again. All right, so I let her know she's coming back on. Her farm, Happy Apples Farm, is in Tonganoxie, but not really. It's a long ways from Tonganoxie. It's out. It's beautiful. And she has alpacas.
While we're waiting, I will invite you to attend our regular advanced training. I know you're going through a lot of Zoom stuff, but tomorrow night we have an interesting topic on mycorrhizal fungi that Dr. Liz Kozioff from the Kansas Biological Survey is going to tell us about. So you're all invited to tune into that.
If you go to the news, did everybody get the newsletter from Tara? I think it was earlier this week, maybe. The links are in there.
I don't remember
scan
getting the newsletter, Julie.
Okay, maybe that's, maybe it only, I don't know if it goes to the training class or not. I'm sorry, I don't know. It's from Tara. I can check on that.
We received a summary of last week's presentation, but I don't recall a newsletter with any additional links
Okay,
either.
sorry, this is,
We'll try to get it out to you because you are invited, like I mentioned the other night, you are invited to learn all you can about everything you can, so. It's pretty tough when you have Wednesday night, 3 hours, and then another hour and a half on Thursday night, but it will be an interesting topic.
Patty, you getting back on there?
I am back on. I couldn't figure out how to get the how to get BONAP to go where you guys were suggesting. But you said it was bonap.org/.
No, .net
.net/
/field maps.
field maps. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna.
You click on the state name, it tells you the plant genera found in Kansas. There's a lot.
And you click on it and it'll show you which ones are available. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right here is where we are, right? Am I in the right
Yeah,
spot?
and then just click on the state of Kansas and then scroll down.
Oh, click here on the state.
Yeah, and then scroll down. And all the plant genera. So you can see down at the bottom.
Oh, at the bottom. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So then we could search for carrots here and see how many we have in Kansas.
So next Wednesday, whoever can recite all of the genera in the state of Kansas at the beginning of the meeting, we'll think of some outstanding prize to give you.
No kidding. Okay, so I would just, I mean, honestly, I just want to be, I mean, I apologize, of course. I knew I would eventually have these internet issues, given my kind of piece together internet out here. But I do want to just open it up. If anybody has any questions about anything we said or wants to learn more, like I'm at the Pollinator Prairie every Monday pretty much in April through October. So if you want to kind of hang out and just talk about plants, that's where I am. We have work days. Julie, I think it's the 1st and 3rd are in the morning and the 2nd and 4th are in the, I probably have that written.
I think that's right. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to click too many times to get to that.
I have it. I have 1st, 3rd, and 5th are from 9 to 11. The 1st, 3rd, and 5th Monday of the month are from 9 to 11. And then the 2nd and 4th Monday are from 4:30 to 6:30 at this point. Although I'll say those evening work days, maybe sometimes the morning work days, when it gets to be really hot in the summer, we sometimes will shift those into a cooler time, but we announce that stuff in the newsletter. So if the people in the class are included in that, they could learn about when the work days are going to be when we change those. We also have committee meetings once a month, the first Thursday. of the month. And we're always looking for people interested. It's a really fun place to be. There's, I love working with native plants, and I'll tell you, this ability to be able to identify them when they're young really produces a lot of plants that go home with people on these days that we work. So we take, that beautiful blazing star, the liatris, those things seed themselves like crazy. But I mean, really, they do. You will find hundreds and hundreds of them. So I take them home and I put them in pots, and I just give them away to people. But we are constantly moving plants that get too close to the paths. So people go home from work days almost all the time with some kind of a plant if they're interested in having it. So anyway, I'll help you find it. So come and help us out there if you need some place to volunteer some time. That's a good one.
There, and we have to be a little, you have to get through some of your training before the volunteering starts, but that'll just be in a few more weeks.
Hey, Patty, I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about your nursery? I looked at it online, and it looks like appointment only, but can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Well, it's really just me. So it's not a giant nursery or anything like that. I just really am passionate about sharing plants with people. And so we are open pretty April through October here. So right now we're just open by appointment. I'm just scrambling, trying to get things de-winterized and little seedlings into pots in time to be able to sell them. I'm a member of Grow Native out of the Missouri Prairie Foundation, and so I participate in some of those sales, but mostly I participate in sales with Deep Roots, which is out of Kansas City. And then we're open on Saturdays here, April through October, for people to come out and walk in my garden. By appointment, I walk in my garden here with people all the time, which means that there aren't a bunch of other people around usually. And so the reason I'm doing it, though, is because I really think people don't get enough time face to face with these plants. So when we built our house out here, I developed all the gardens around it with either edible plants or native plants, or North American native plants. So I have an oak leaf hydrangea, right? Because those are the kinds of things that people are putting in gardens, and I'm trying to talk to people about that idea of range and what is native and things like that. So the difference between reading about a plant in a plant catalog and coming out and standing next to it in your garden and really getting to know how big it is and how it behaves, I find that to be really kind of helpful. And it relieves a lot of fears people might have with how these will behave in their garden and what are you going to do with it, right? But for me, it's all fun, and it's meant to just help give people access to the plants and get them up close to them. So I'll just share this with you guys, because we're all kind of in the same we love this stuff tribe, right? I want to make what I do here a nonprofit where people can come out here and propagate and cultivate with me and learn how to do this. Because I really think this is something that, as people who care about the environment, to me, this is the basic. This is the base of everything. Knowing these plants that grow around us is, I think, for me, it's like knowing your family, knowing your home, knowing where you live, is knowing these plants that grow around you. So anyway, that's my place. That's what I do. It's it's very much homemade and very much just me talking a lot and working real hard, having
Great.
fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? You guys are great, by the way. I just am so happy. First, I want to say a big thank you to Jim Walton and all the other guys that got together and made this Master Naturalist program happen. I hear from people in other counties all the time that go, hey, how can I be a Master Naturalist? Well, you know, Johnson County is the one that does it. So you guys have really made something great. And I appreciate all of you new people that are coming in with this interest to help our community learn more about the outdoors and I don't even want to call them resources. I mean, it's really our home, all of our shared home. And I appreciate all of you guys being here to learn more and how to talk to people about it.
Okay, anybody have anything else? Patty, thank you. You did a wonderful job. It's always so interesting, and I'm always so impressed and humbled, but so happy to hear everything that you have to say.
You guys just give me a place to share, and I appreciate it.
Okay, so I do think that Patty's gonna work with Tara and get you the resource list to send out in a PDF so that you know, we probably all wrote it down, but just in case, she'll send it out again. And so you can, and those books, I have most of those books. They are really great books. So is there one last call for questions? And otherwise we can wrap up the night. Jim, do you have anything?
I'll just have Tara try to get that link for tomorrow night for those people that are interested as well.
So you'll work with Tara on that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you. Have a good evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. And tomorrow night and next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great job, Patty.
Thank you. I